Scott Drew just changed college basketball forever.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to a somewhat emergency edition of Locked On Baylor, the day after Christmas, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Somewhat of an emergency because I didn't plan to do this. On Wednesday's show, I said, have a Merry Christmas. This is going to be the end of the week. I think it's actually Tuesday's show. But on the afternoon, almost evening of Christmas Eve, the Baylor Bears decided to change college basketball history. Today, we're talking about James Nnaji joining the team mid-season as a guy who has already been drafted into the NBA. What this means for Baylor and the ripple effects for all of college basketball is coming up on this emergency edition of Locked On Baylor. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Rogue Media Network. I hope you guys did have a Merry Christmas. I hope it was a great holiday filled with family and love and all the same feelings you get at the end of It's a Wonderful Life, the perfect movie that I hope most of you watched on this Christmas as well. But besides that, we did have some news in the Baylor world. James Nnaji is joining the team mid-season, and he comes in and is eligible to play in the Big 12 opener against TCU January 3rd. And not only that, he comes in with 4 years of eligibility remaining as a 21-year-old. It's great for Baylor. What it means for college basketball, we'll get into. But for Baylor, it's a heck of a move. We heard Scott Drew teasing it, 2 weeks ago, last week. We were saying, yeah, that could happen. We could bring in a midseason transfer, one that's eligible to play. Oh, a big man, Bryce Cherry? Yes, that's exactly what we're looking at, is basically what Scott was saying with Bryce in that media availability, and it has happened. You bring in a 21-year-old 7-footer who's been playing professional basketball for 7 years. 7 years, and he now joins your roster. This is exactly what Baylor needed. It's probably not a great sign for the health of Bodo, who Scott Drew said back in November would either be ready by about Christmas or he wouldn't be ready at all this season. Kind of a big jump there. And here we are past Christmas, and they've gone out and made an unprecedented move in college basketball to bring in someone else at Bodo's position. So you've kind of got your writing on the wall there. But in terms of what this Baylor team needs, this is exactly it. Exactly it. A 7-footer with like a 7'7" wingspan who is a shot blocking machine, absolute rim protector. Baylor has not had that outside of a raw Yves Missi. They haven't had that in years. Even their best teams didn't really have a rim protector like this. Like, you had some off the charts defensive players in the low post, like a Mark Vital, for example, or before that, a Rico Gathers, but you did not have a 7-footer who was that much of a disruption around the rim. This is a guy who averages a block a game in professional basketball. And in terms of the offensive numbers, it doesn't jump off the page necessarily for a guy who's playing, about 10 minutes per game over in Spain. But we'll see how that translates to college basketball. Like that is the next big question. And how quickly a guy like James Nnaji can come in after not playing anywhere, not playing for any team since August, to come in and just assimilate with this Baylor basketball team. I don't know if he'll be eligible to play against TCU on January 3rd. I don't know if he's playing against TCU on January 3rd. But I think what is very apparent here is Baylor needs this kind of player, and now specifically this player. And I think they will try to get him on the floor and playing real reasonable minutes as soon as possible. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, because it's tough for me to think this kid is just going to assimilate to the Big 12. It's tough for anybody. But I do want to get to what this means for college basketball, because it's sparked a lot of controversy. There are already some coaches who have been talking about it. We heard it before the season with some of these G League guys. Tom Izzo didn't like it. Dan Hurley didn't like it. In fact, I think Scott Drew quote tweeted it, was like, yeah, Tom Izzo, 100%. And now here we are, mid-season. Necessity becomes necessary. You've got to go out and get a guy like James Nnaji. And the question has now become, is this good for college basketball? And if you want my honest take, I don't think it's good for college basketball. I don't like it for college basketball. And we're in this weird, mushy middle of, it helps my team. I think it's going to help my team, this team that I love and that I cover every day. And I also don't think it's good for college basketball. I also don't think it's fair to trash James Nnaji for that. Here's a guy who's looking for more development, is really what this is at the end of the day. He wants to play in the NBA because he's already been drafted into the NBA. And he wants the right development. He feels he's not getting it enough in Spain. And so he could play in the U.S. in college, the best developmental tool the NBA's ever had. And the rules will allow him to do that. And it's tough for me to be really mad at Scott Drew because the rules allow for him to do this. We have left the door open for this. But this is a guy who was picked one spot off the first round of the NBA draft 3 years ago. And now he's just going to come in and play college basketball? That's a weird thing, man. He's drafted 31st in the 2023 NBA draft. And he's going to be playing in the Big 12 this year, playing his first Big 12 game in a couple of weeks. It's bizarre. It's odd. And I know we've had some European pros coming in the last couple of years, but it's been guys like, guys like Marino Dubravcic, not a guy who was picked 31st in the draft, not a guy who's been playing 7 years of professional basketball, not a guy who played in 3 summer leagues. Like, that's crazy, man. When we're really thinking about it, if I had told you that 2 years ago, would you have believed any of that? That here's a guy who's been playing in the summer league? Here he is, if you're watching on YouTube, here he is guarding Victor Wembanyama. And he's going to be playing college basketball this year. This is something that's against everything the sport has ever done, really. There are some rules in place that you see in baseball and in hockey where you can be drafted and then go and play college. But this has never been a thing in basketball. Never. And even in those sports, baseball, for example, you can get drafted out of high school or you stay 3 years of college. But you're not being drafted out of high school, playing spring training for the Chicago Cubs, and then going to play at South Carolina. That's not how that works. That doesn't happen like that. In the NHL, these guys don't play preseason games and then go play for Boston University. It doesn't happen, but this is what's happening right now in basketball. And again, I'm not really in the business of blaming the player or even the coach here, because that rule is available to them. But what I don't like is the trickle-down effect I think it's going to have, the domino effect of, here's a guy was projected to be a big prospect, didn't have the greatest first year in college at Kansas, and then gets selected 37th, doesn't sign the contract, I get it, and then says, you know what, I actually don't like where I was picked. I'm going to go and play. I'm going to enter the transfer portal. I'm going to go play at Kentucky instead. Or in this case, you can have someone who gets drafted and then goes through the summer league and is like, I'm not going to get a spot on the NBA roster this year. I'm going to go play college instead. Personally, I don't think that's good for college basketball. I don't think that's good for the NBA. I don't think it's good for anyone but the player. And power to the players, sure. But it's one of these things I went on the mini rant about a few weeks ago about where I don't like where college basketball is going. You know, there's zero continuity. There's entirely roster turnover. It like college football has become about money more so than development, i.e. Rob Wright. You know, like and that with that, the people that lose are the fans, in my opinion. Because this is a great thing for the player. Right? James Nnaji can now go and develop. But at some point we got to have some rules, man. Like that we got to have some boundaries like life has. And I get it. People are going to be in the comments. You didn't sign the contract. What's the problem? I understand that. But he's been playing pro basketball for 7 years. He's been drafted and he's played in 3 summer leagues. In other sports, guys are not playing against other professionals under the umbrella of the professional league and then coming back to play college sports. It doesn't happen. And there's a reason for that. But in basketball and college basketball, we have just let the floodgates open so much that we don't have any rules to this. And it's the same thing, goes for the same guys that, go out of high school to the G League and then want to play college. At some point, you got to make a choice. And now we've just left every option open. And I'm telling you, there are going to be other instances like this for years to come that are not as clear cut as James Nnaji's. Here's a guy who took a strategic route here of, I'm not getting anywhere playing in Europe. And I haven't done well enough in the summer league for an NBA team to sign me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my summer league on tape. They said this before he played in the summer league this year, that he's looking for college teams. I'm going to have my summer league on tape, and then I'm going to work out in the fall. Some college basketball team's going to get desperate, and they're going to need me. And that's exactly what happened. And then we're going to open up a can of worms where all kinds of guys are doing this, and a college team doesn't get desperate enough. Or instead of one guy who's showcasing this, there's 12 guys, and there's only 10 desperate teams. It's just going to, and we're going to lose the point of development all over, because these kids are just going to bounce around and bounce around and bounce around to whomever gives them the money, presumably, and gives them a chance to play basketball, instead of going through the struggle that is development and playing 2 or 3 years of college basketball at the same place under the same coach and then getting your shot. But it's going to become guys who say, you know what? I just don't like where I was picked. I don't like being the 36th pick. I don't like being the 51st pick. I'm going to go back and play college basketball. And an NBA team is sitting there thinking, what did we do wrong? It's not our fault he slipped to 51. This kid declared for the draft. It used to be, I remember in 2020, after Baylor had that great season that was cut short due to COVID, and we're sitting around in May, like on pins and needles, tweet alerts for Jared Butler and Maceo Teague, thinking, are these guys going to go into the draft? Because that's what I mean. Like, at some point, you got to make a decision. You can go all the way up till, 3 weeks before the draft, and you can do all the workouts. You can meet with the teams. And if you don't like where the signs are pointing at that point, you come back. But now we have extended that all the way through the draft to where even after you're picked, if you don't like it, you can go back. So again, it's summation. Do I think this is bad for college basketball? I can't help it. I do. I do think it's bad for college basketball. But right now, it is well within the rules. It's completely within the rules, actually. And it benefits Baylor greatly right now. And if I'm saying anything to James Nnaji, I say, kid, you made a heck of a pick. You made a heck of a pick. A kid seems strong. He can buy a drink without playing a college basketball game. But you made the right choice, I'd say. Scott Drew has done a hell of a job developing players in general, but specifically developing international players, specifically ones from the continent of Africa, like James Nnaji is from. He's from Nigeria, and he has developed very well at that particular position for international players. So he made the right choice. I'll tell you that much. Not even just because I'm doing Locked on Baylor, but this is a guy who has had his rights owned by 3 different NBA teams. He was part of a trade for Karl Anthony Towns this year. And he's going to be playing for Baylor. Like, that's just, maybe I'm just old man yelling at cloud. Maybe that's it. But it's just not making a ton of sense to me. But Baylor fans, you got what you were looking for this team. And I am excited about that. You've got a legit rim protector, shot blocker, guy who shoots, over 70% from the floor. So you've got that true back to the basket kind of big man there. Athletic, wingspan out the wazoo. So I'm excited about that for sure. But I do think this brings a bigger question to college basketball that is an uncomfortable one. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Of course, we're coming at you pretty much every weekday. I say that because we had Christmas this week and I wasn't doing it then. On YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We will see you on Monday on probably a crossover edition of your favorite show, Locked on Baylor.